So, today's lesson, we're picking up and talking about the idea of if the 1876 World Expo is a world expo, what about the rest of the world? Specifically, what do they think of America's great exposition? And, what impact, if any, did the expo have, did their stuff from the expo have on America? And we're going to specifically look at three countries very quickly and briefly. So, the first one, England. Now, if you think about this, in some respects, the expo was a little awkward for the English. I mean, let's face it, the expo is celebrating the 100th anniversary of America breaking away from England. So it might be surprising to realize that the English were not only astounded by the things that America had, specifically like the technological innovations and the the inventions and all of the innovations that were there. They were exceedingly proud of America as a country. The analogy that I would use is it's sort of like if, you know, as a kid, you have an argument with your parents about what you want to study in school. And they really, no, you're going to be, we want you to be a doctor or a lawyer. And you're like, no, I want to be an engineer or an architect. And they're like, well, we're not going to pay for school because that's not what we want you to do. And we don't think that that would be a good design pursuit for you or, anything like that. And you say, no, I'm going to go do it myself then and I'll pay for it. And you go off and do. And 15 years later, you come back to your parents and you realize that some of what your parents said about things being difficult were true. But your parents realize that you made a great living off of what you did and you're now super successful. And they are so proud of you. And that's England. England's like, yep, that's my boy over there. Look at what he's accomplished. Isn't he amazing? This is how they look at America. And if you think about it, I mean, we still have a very, very close relationship with England. We share a common language. We share a commonality of our heritage and culture and backgrounds. Things like, growing up watching Thomas the Train or Peppa Pig. These are English programs. And some of your parents might watch things like Downton Abbey or any number of PBS masterpiece shows. It's all English. And there's still this great connection of us. And it's not just the attitude that England brought with them. England also brought a product for America. This is the penny farthing bicycle. Now, notice it's really different than modern bikes because the wheels are made of wood with a metal band around them. And if you look up here, there's really not a great chance to do any turning. Now, you will notice that this bike actually has a string attached to it. Okay. This is an add-on that was put on later by the Americans. The early English bicycles did not have any brakes on them either. The way that you like brake or braked, broke, the way that you braked, I think in this case, the act of engaging the brakes was you had to try to pedal backwards, which was potentially dangerous because the back wheel would go wee over the top of it as you try doing this because you notice there's no gears or chain. It's all direct drive here. But the bike caught on, and within a few years, there were hundreds of thousands of these things all over America. Then there's the Japanese. The Japanese didn't have nearly the warm, fuzzy reaction that the British did. They're just like, there's a lot of people. It's really crowded. Everybody's pushing and shoving. A lot of people are swearing. We don't really see anything. And then we go back to our hotels disappointed. Meh. Japan's contribution to the fair and to America was this pretty little thing. This is kudzu, a flowering vine. So kudzu, if you're looking at how to spell it, it's up here, Kudzu. Kudzu is used in Japan because it holds together the soil very well. And Japanese terrace farming, they cultivated this stuff because it allowed them to grow and to be productive agriculturally. American farmers thought that it would provide much the same effect if used in areas of like really loose soil or dust or areas where it was hard to grow crops. Well, what they didn't realize was is that kudzu is like an invasive plant species, and it's like the equivalent of the cockroach. If left to its own devices, it quickly overwhelms everything and kills every plant in the area. Um, and it's virtually unkillable. So, yeah, that's what Japan left us because we bought tons of it and planted it everywhere. Were we dumb for doing so? Yeah, because it really didn't like the Japanese didn't occur to them because they didn't have that problem over there because they kept it under control. And then there's Germany. Now, Germany had only existed as a country for 5 years at this point. Germany was created at the end of the Franco Prussian War when a northern German state called Prussia defeated France and united the German states together as one country. Now, unlike the British, who were super proud of us, and the Japanese, who just thought it was a useless kind of waste of time and didn't really care, the Germans are embarrassed. And they're not embarrassed because, oh, it's so poor Americans, look at what they have. It is so embarrassing. They're embarrassed because this is their display giant guns. And they walked away sort of with the idea. One of the German ambassadors to the fair wrote back that, while America has, things like uh, telephones and rock drills and sewing machines and ice makers and root beer and buttered popcorn, all the Germans have is the world's biggest guns. So it makes Germany look barbaric and warlike and savage. Now, I said that these products had a remarkable effect on America, and they did. So, whereas like the Americans loved the bicycle, and initially we loved kudzu until it began taking over everything, these guns scared the bejeebers out of us because the range on these babies is close to 2 miles. Additionally, you can kind of see here, there's an open display here. Unlike America's big guns, which, if we go back here real quick, I will even show you because you may have forgotten what those look like. Just doing it again. So, America's big gun right here. Okay. Now, notice over here, you got the cannonballs. Those guns, you packed powder in the front, put the ball in, pounded it down, went in the back, lit a fuse, and boom. And the gun would shoot like close to a mile. These babies, there was a cartridge that went in there. And inside the cartridge, the explosive and the powder were in one form. The back of these opened up, which you can see here, and the bullets just slid in. You close the back, you pulled a string or a lever, and the gun shot and hit a range of up to 2 miles. The American Department of War wrote a memo, a private secret memo to the president, detailing that if a European country were to buy these guns and put them on a ship, there is nothing that America could do to defend any of its coastal cities. They would simply be blown apart. So, whereas the Germans are like, oh, we look so horrible, we look warlike, we look barbaric, the Americans are like, oh my gosh, we're so dead. We're so dead from the big guns. Yeah. And it starts a period of military buildup, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, while the fair is going on, it's not like the rest of the world stops and there's nothing else going on of note. Things begin drifting into the fair, and we're going to look at three of them really quickly. On June the 25th, in Montana at the Little Bighorn River, famed Union general from the Civil War, Indian fighter, and all around heartthrob of American ladies, George Armstrong Custer, he of the steely blue eyes and the flowing blonde locks. So as he rode on his horse, his hair blew majestically in the wind like some kind of male supermodel. He and a group of about maybe 600 or 700 men attempted to sneak up and ambush the Lakota Sioux under the command of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. And there are approximately 3 or 4 thousand Indians who were all sitting on the high ground above the Little Bighorn. And as Armstrong Custer rode through the riverbed, his men were massacred horribly. So, just as a brief sort of pointing out why did this happen. It all had to do with the discovery of gold in South Dakota, where the Lakota Sioux were from. And there was a treaty giving all the Dakotas to the Lakota, which is where we get the word Dakota from. When white people discovered gold and began moving into the area, Custer was sent in to keep them out. His conclusion was, well, there's too many of them here already, and we can't stop them, so it's just time for the Indians to move. The Indians fought back against that. Custer was told to wait until reinforcements showed up and until something could be negotiated. He decided to sneak off on his own. He divided his small force of like 600 men into three groups and sent them in different areas, hoping to ambush the Indians. They unfortunately got ambushed, and all of his men were butchered horribly because of him not following orders. So the ironic part about this is a couple of levels. Number one, when President Grant got word of what happened, he knew Custer actually from the war. His first conclusion was that Custer disobeyed orders, and that's why this happened. And Grant was absolutely right. That's not how the American public saw it. The American people on both sides, North and South, viewed it as an act of aggression on the part of the Indians who needed to be stamped out for what they had done. And as a result, they turned their animosity away from each other towards hatred of the Lakota, beginning a new era of Indian wars, which will feature many former Confederate officers serving as generals for the U.S. Army in Indian fighting. On August the 1st, we have a birthday present to ourselves. Colorado becomes the 38th state. Colorado and its big, goofy flag. And not to forget about this, there's also a presidential election going on in 1876, and both of the candidates show up to give speeches. New York Governor Democrat Samuel, I look like a sleepy turtle, Tilden, and Ohio Senator Governor Rutherford Bertrand Hayes, who looks like any number of other bearded weirdos of the time. So we'll pick this up tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Peace and love.